Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this next session in the technical presentations for this wonderful show. My name is Robin Garrity. I am the Senior External Affairs Officer with the SESAR 3 Joint Undertaking. I'm a former air traffic controller and have been involved with the SESAR U Space program since before it existed, and actually been involved with unmanned aviation since 2001, which shows how old I am. Very pleased to see you here. What I'd like to do today is to take you through a story. We'll start with looking back a little bit with 3 presentations on work that the SESAR program has done, and then we'll look forward to see some of the projects that we're starting with now and where we expect to go with the next round of projects. I'm hoping that we can show you how the program has evolved over this period and why, and to show that it's becoming more mature as we get to know more information as we do our research. But of course, SESAR's not working alone. I wouldn't make any such claim. And an important milestone that coincided with the end of a certain phase of our research was, of course, the U Space regulation. This has enabled us now to sit the research activities on a firmer foundation. The regulation is not the end of regulatory activity. That will continue, of course, but so will the research, because there's a lot of gaps, as I'm sure you're aware, and we'll hear about some of those activities, both looking backwards and looking forwards during today's presentation. Sorry, Giancarlo. I have 6 excellent presenters for you today, all of whom have been involved with the SESAR program for a while. They're all specialists in their own field, and we'll talk about what we do from a particular perspective. But just maybe I ought to start by just saying what the SESAR program is in just a few seconds. It's a public-private partnership under the aegis of the European Commission, and it's a single European skies ATM research pillar. Now, we look at all aspects of air traffic management, of which drones and U Space and UTM is one, but a very important one and a very an ever-growing one when we consider that many of the visions you see at the moment are moving towards a convergence between the new kinds of airspace users that we're hearing about now and traditional aviation. So it's important that U Space isn't looked at in isolation, it is looked at as a holistic whole. And one of our projects looks very much at this kind of integration we'll come to. So with no further ado, I'd like to start introducing our panelists. I'd like to start with Giancarlo Ferrara. Giancarlo is currently the U Space Research and Innovation Work Programme Manager of the Innovation Division at Eurocontrol's European Green Sky Directorate. Giancarlo has covered several executive and programme management, being the head of the ENAV Safety Division, Safety Post Holder from 2011 to 2014, the head of the ENAV SPA CNS ATM Experimental Centre from 2004 to 2008, and the head of the Verification and Validation Unit at SESAR's Joint Undertaking from 2009 to 2011. Prior to this, he worked at Eurocontrol's Directorate of ATM Programmes, Safety Enhancement Business Division, as the European Coordinator for Safety Occurrences Reporting for 2003 to 2004. Giancarlo, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So you prefer go there?
As you prefer.
Okay. So just to introduce you, my role today is just to give you a bit of snapshot about one of the projects that we were managing within the SESAR program that Robin was introducing before. Core 6M is mainly a very large demonstration project that we were building. Probably we have some slides. I don't know if they will. Oh, I think on the bottom, yeah. Okay.
Sorry, Giancarlo, can you just go back one? Just go back one,
yeah.
Sorry. So familiar with this, I missed the opportunity to tell you. Of course, your questions are most welcome from the floor because it's a long, thin room. We'd like you to use the Slido program if you have been familiar with this. You can download it from the various stores. If you can just scan the QR code that's on the screen at the moment, this slide will appear again, but now's a good time to do it. So if you think of your question, you can type in the question and it will come to our experts on screen in front of us. But I will show it to you again. Just give you a couple of minutes to, well, a few seconds to take a picture of it. Okay, we'll leave it there, but we will show it again. I apologize, Giancarlo.
Thank you, Robin. I will give you, is it okay? Fine. So I will move to the next presentation, my presentation. So just a few slides, as I said, I will not bother you so much. It's mainly to give you an overview of the activities we were conducting and also, let's say, of the transversal type of coordination we were trying to put in place with all the other initiatives that were dealing with the U Space domain. So in terms of project, Chorus was, as I said already, a very large demonstration, but was really a very large demonstration because we were having 6 very large demonstrations organized in the project in 7 countries mainly. These were referring to the scenarios of 7 countries. And the project was quite wide also in terms of partners, but the main scope was to consolidate what we were already doing in the previous project, which was called Chorus, to try to extend the concept of operations we were defining 3 years ago, consolidating also what are the urban air mobility requirements. So what are the services that we can, let's say, devote not only to the small UAS type of aircraft, but also to large UAM like for aerotaxi applications and so on. So this was the main objective. Mainly the project was having 2 threads. One thread that was, let's say, a bit theoretical. So again, it was a sort of refinement of the previous concept of operations we were defining together with SESAR Joint Undertaking. And then we were having a demonstration thread that was quite wide, quite challenging as well, especially in terms of authorization required for having flight trials in place. So this is the high-level work program structure you can see on your right side. It's mainly, as I said, there is, of course, some activities that were devoted to the management and communication, but the main core activity was the one that you see in yellow. So there were the 6 very large demonstrations we were conducting in different countries, and I will give you some details later. As I said, the two threads were mainly theoretical work, and as you can see here, we were exploring several use cases, and we were building on the U Space ConOps Edition 3 we were delivering 3 years ago as part of Chorus activity, but again, developed together with the other projects we were having at that time. And then we were also coordinating in this thread with the other relevant projects that were dealing, of course, with U Space and US operations. For the demo activities, I already mentioned almost everything, but there were several use cases that were addressed there. I will provide later, again, some information. And here you can see the main information and the location where we were having trials during the project. As I said, 7 countries, but mainly 6 validation locations. We were having one in Belgium that was in Zeebrugge, mainly related to applications close to the airborne. Then we were having work package 7 that was mainly Germany and UK that were coupling and were addressing aerotaxi application within the Frankfurt and London terminal area. Here we were having some fast time simulation performed in these 2 scenarios that were quite challenging, of course. And then we were doing some physical demonstrations that were based in Korsted in Germany and were involving the Volocopter aircraft. Then we were having one large demonstration in Italy that was mainly for medical delivery, mainly moving from a managed airport. So we were having US operations mainly in a managed airport, in a controlled airport. Then there was a large drone that was going to a small aerodrome, and then from the small aerodrome there were some other drones that were taking care of transporting the medical supply to the hospital in the urban environment. Then we were also having one interesting scenario that was referring to the urban delivery. It was in Castelldefels, close to Barcelona. It was also, let's say, quite challenging, and there were several outcomes that were collected. Finally, we had a sort of intercity connection between Norrköping and Linköping. It was in Sweden. It was, again, an interesting activity, quite challenging. I remember that the day where we were having the final demonstration was really windy, and I was not expecting they were flying. And finally, we had also work package 11, mainly Aéroport de Paris, that was conducting, let's say, a series of trials, mainly based in Pontoise, on different scenarios with different use cases, that were trying to address the aerotaxi requirements and the feasibility of this type of activities. And Martin, of course, was part of the team that was working on the subject. So this was one of the last demonstrations we were having. So as I said, the scenarios were different in different type of context, moving from the urban, going to the harbour, and also close to the city center in the suburban area. What I can say, oh sorry, I was coming back instead of, sorry for that. Something that I would mention before leaving, was not only this activity, in the framework of Chorus 6OM, we were closely working with SESAR Joint Undertaking. We were trying to build a sort of a partnership, not only Chorus 6OM, but with all the other U Space related projects, to try to get on board what were the main outcomes coming from the other activities, and try to have, to build a sort of common picture, you know. This was helping as well SESAR Joint Undertaking to avoid that at the end we were having 17 different type of concept of operation. So this was the real added value, was done through the so-called U Space Concept of Operation Coordination Cell that was mainly animated by, let's say, chaired by SESAR Joint Undertaking, but also animated by Eurocontrol. And of course, we were trying to involve a lot of stakeholders we were having around the table, and that were mainly coming from the projects that were funded by SESAR Joint Undertaking. More or less, that's all. If you are looking for the results, of course, next week in Bari, we will have a final workshop of Chorus 6OM, where all the results of this demonstration will be presented. So in case you are invited to come, you will find additional information at the website, and there is also a page in the events where you can register for the workshop we are going to organize on the 29th and 30th of March. That's all from my side. In case you have questions, feel free.
Thank you, Giancarlo. It's no accident that we started with Giancarlo, in that the Chorus ConOps has underpinned from the very start what the whole U Space program is supposed to be. The first version of the Chorus ConOps was the first time we ever had a kind of a holistic picture of what U Space in Europe might look like. Is it going to look like that when it's all fully deployed? Well, probably not, but that's not the point. The point is we created a picture based on research and thinking that was then reinforced and modified by the research results. So this ConOps coordination cell that they're talking about was of pivotal importance, making sure that these individual programs didn't just disappear and produce some dusty report that went on a shelf. This goes back into the ConOps that's then tested by other members of the projects, giving a much more valid result than would otherwise be the case. So having the latest version of the Chorus project, which allowed both the upgrade of the ConOps to incorporate IAM, innovative air mobility, and to test it by flying aircraft as well, whilst coordinating with other projects, means it's central to the program. Hence, place of honour at the beginning of the work. So thank you very much for Giancarlo. And he also mentioned the cooperation of our partners, which I think is something that I'm certainly guilty of not acknowledging enough. SESAR Joint Undertaking is, if you like, the centre of all this, but without the partners, particularly strong partners like Eurocontrol, we could do nothing. And so this ability to work with partners in industry, in academia, from all walks of life is, again, a great strength of the SESAR programme. Now, so having talked about the ConOps initial demonstrations, now we move in my story to actual U Space at work, I might call it that. We're actually about to show something which is how this can actually work, how we're using it today in a very exciting series of demonstrations, which will be presented by my next speaker, Michael Shamin. Now, Michael had a commercial engineering background, holding an MBA from Bocconi, Columbia, and a private pilot's license. Before joining the healthcare sector full-time, he worked as a decade as a consultant in Bain Accenture, and another decade as an industrial executive with Toyota Motor Europe. Helicus, Michael's company, of which he is CEO, was launched in 2016 to coordinate the open HAI ecosystem of multi-sectoral organizations to jointly enable robust, safe and economical unmanned aerial services. Wow. So Helicus products include drone-agnostic command and control center, fleet software, as well as ground automation. Educate us, Michael.
Thank you, Robin, for the nice introduction. You can hear me? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Does anyone still need the Slido slide, or have we got it all now? Okay.
I move back. Yeah. Okay. So indeed, we're I would say, thanks to underpinnings from Chorus 6M, with whom, and then I'll show some linkages that we have, we were able to move a step ahead and see whether we can take real life needs, social needs, into defined use cases, and then put in an extra piece of mobility supported by drones. And what you see here is actually our operations on hospital rooftops. We have 4 of these in operation, where with indeed a group of actors together, we were able to actually obtain the first operational authorization in the EU to actually execute beyond visual line of sight mission over a populated area, which is thanks also to the Civil Aviation Authority, also here in the room, also from Belgium. That's where we launched as, let's say, Belgium-oriented. And then further, we then start to check other procedures like Article 13 of the, at that point, new legislation to move these regulations also and obtain this operational authorization also across borders into other member states. So this was all the work that we were doing, and we did it basically with one team. I think this is the key point. So we actually flew in different countries, but always following the same method. One operator, different drones. At a certain point, we had 4 drones in the air at the same time, operated by a single fleet capable command and control center in 3 different countries, right? So, and this is our meeting in Cologne. This was 1st of September last year, where we came together to actually exchange, let's say, our information. There is no build-up in this slide, but anyway, you see 2 medical actors. We calculate the route, the red route, and we have a command and control center that obtains an order, does this calculation, and uploads the flight path into any of a variety of drones. It's a drone agnostic setup, and we very importantly also request the individual flight authorization to the USP that then has the task to evaluate whether this is authorized and give it back. We did a lot of desktop exercises to get that in order, to get these processes and the IT systems connected and to effectuate the flights. And we have measured that the time there is, let's say, thanks to the digital interfaces and all the partners that you see here present, let's say, reduced to 10 minutes, but it's still 10 times too much. So that's why we have a follow-up project to try to limit that time and to get it actually closer to what the use case, the medical use cases require. But you see here all the partners, and this is an unreadable slide. I always flash it up and down, and it's just to show that actually we really had the full ecosystem present and working together to achieve a few objectives. And honestly, I think the 4th one, to demonstrate novel public UAM services and service models, this is really what the core was. And of course, we help urban authorities, who are very important also to get the operational authorization in place. So the M3 mitigative component is actually to align with all the, let's say, the environment, that in case anything would happen, that we really have an emergency response plan in place. So that was done with urban authorities, amongst others, to realize also their role and make their first steps in the US world. We also were looking for to ensure that we have a safe setup, in order to, with which we can achieve this social impact, and finally that it's environmentally friendly, because we are competing with actually use cases, roads-based, that are not so environmentally friendly. So this was actually a very positive social mission. And then finally, we worked a lot on regulations, standards, business prospects, and the outputs thereof. And that's where we had indeed a strong link and a lot of support from Chorus 6M, and actually also the SGU team directly to work on that. And basically, these are the 7 work packages that we did. And maybe not the idea to go in detail, but the first one is about creating the requirements. So, okay, this indeed was about real life requirements, with actually real blood, real human tissue, real medical items that we flew across. On the important U Space services that we were testing and setting up in preparation to the new U Space service related legislation that came out in January this year, we actually indeed fed back, for example, 5, well, we fed back a lot, but 5 items were accepted as adaptations into the Chorus 6M managed CONOPS. So we're very proud actually of that, that we actually not only give a lot of output, output, but maybe also some quality in the output. So that's always nice. And then the next one is then indeed all our own infrastructure. So these links that you saw, interfacing all the drones, interfacing the USSP, all with the C2C, that we have a fluent setup that actually worked. We did not know whether that actually would work. We know that it actually does, and it does give advantages. Then we had these flights that we executed based also on tabletop exercises, and these appeared to be extremely valuable. Not just go out in the field, but also so to really practice them a lot before we go out there. And that we actually on the performance assessment and the recommendations, so our main outcome, I would say, is that we, this big group of use cases, actually require integrated but also automated U Space services. And that's where we have good ideas to continue to work upon. And then, so we had, from SDU, we at a certain point won a dissemination prize contest because we had the first project at above 1,000 followers on LinkedIn. Now we're at, I think, 3,000, so I have 2,500. But I think many projects got very many followers, so I think this is a joint effort that we all did, and we liked each other's posts, and we formed the same community in the end. But also, and we got another prize now, the Digital European Sky Innovation Award last week in Geneva for our project, and that's, I mean, really important for the teams that worked so heavily for us. But I think it's a shared prize because we already showed so many interactions between all the projects. So actually, we should keep it up together. But really honored to be the straw man in front to get it for all of us. And then finally, ethics is of course here always an important item, especially for medical areas. But that was then also addressed. Maybe very fast, of course, we did a lot, we achieved a lot, but I always say we tricked it a bit because we had a predecessor project called SAPPHIRE, where already in October 2019, we actually, under national legislation, did a flight between hospitals across city in SAPPHIRE. But, the new European regulated, the drone legislation came out, and that, of course, changed. It was a full new world, and that's where we kicked off SAPPHIRE Med upon. So we submitted already in April 21, so very early in our project, the request to operation authorization to BCA and sitting in this room. And we worked together a lot to get that let's say accepted. We had already, and then we finally had in May actually we did the test that I previously mentioned, cross-border control, and in June we finally obtained the operation authorization, which we immediately effected, by the way. I think 3 days later, 21st, we already did the flight empty, just to say, well, no one gonna take that back away. But the full summer we then really started flying. We did really some medical missions, and then we then filed the next step, the Article 13 based extensions in the Netherlands and Germany. We obtained in that summer in Netherlands, and also we did then the flights in Germany. And of course, the that's then actually we will continue after the project, but that's where SAPPHIRE Ready. We can now confirm that we have also won the project, and we will, as of the 1st of June, join that sequel project, focusing on exactly these follow-up steps to get faster, more integrated setup and really ground-based automated volume in the air. Yeah? So that's the it will be focusing on the U3 and U4 U Space services. Voilà. Actually, that was my bit. I hope it was not too long, and it was a bit interesting.
Thank you, Michael. So now we've heard about the conceptual base to what we do. We've heard of an active demonstrations that's leading to life-saving operations potentially in the healthcare sector. Now, I did mention at the beginning of my introduction that in fact ATM and U Space need to work together. This is really important. Mentioned also by Michael when he talked about the fact that his system has to talk to the air navigation service providers and get support from the local CAA. Now, we had a project, and it's still to this date, the only industrial research project that we've ever conducted in the SESAR program into U Space. So we'd now like to hear a little bit about that, Project 34 Aura, which is a project looking at the integration of air traffic management and U Space. And it'll be presented by my next speaker, Manuel Martinez. Manuel works for the Indra Systems in the air traffic management sector. Initially working in the command and control department, he later worked on ATM projects, for en route TMA operations and ground-based safety nets. Currently head of U Space UTM SE department, he defines Indra's U Space products and participates in several SESAR U Space projects, leading the Project 34 Aura collaborative ATM U Space interface. Manuel.
Thank you, Robin, for the introduction. Well, I will introduce you to the P34 project, Aura, ATM and U Space interface. This project is based in two work packages. The work package 1 is the collaborative ATM and U Space interface, and the objective is to define a common interface between ATM and U Space, by leading with the generation of a common interface between both systems, and by identifying the initial service that will be part of this interface. This permits to guarantee the interoperability between both systems, avoiding the airspace fragmentation and also allowing the safe drones operation in controlled and non-controlled airspace. The other solutions involved in the project is the solution number 2, the highly automated collaborative ATM and U Space environment. And the objective of the solution is to define a novel concept of operation for drones, considering a fully collaborative environment with ATM. This solution is a medium-long-term horizon, because the concept developed are thinking about the near future, in which the traffic of drones will increase a lot, considering ratios from 10 to 1 related to the managed aviation. Regarding the objective of the solution number 1, is to define, as I told before, a common interface between ATM and U Space. And we have identified in this solution a set of basic services that will be part of this common interface. Also, we have defined the information exchange needed for covering each of the services identified between ATM and U Space. And we have been focused in these 5 services. The Operation Plan Information Exchange Service, which the objective is to provide functionalities between U Space and ATM in order to request activation and authorization for the flight plans of drones that are going to fly in a controlled airspace, mainly in medium, high-risk environment with possible integration with managed aviation. The other service included in the interface is the Geofence Information Exchange Service. By means, the ATM system is able to transmit to the U Space restricted or not restricted or permitted areas for flying the unmanned aviation. Other service is the Tactical Operational Message Information Exchange. By means, we are able to transmit tactical alert between drones and manned aviation from the U Space system to the ATM in order to the ATCO is aware of these situations and take the action corresponding to solve this conflict. Other service including the interface is the Tactical Non-Conformance Monitoring Information Exchange Service. By means, we can advise to the controller when a drone is not following the flight plan schedule. And the last service is the Tracking Information Exchange Service. By means, we are able to exchange the tracks between ATM and U Space in both directions in order to represent the manned and non-manned aviation in each of the systems. The principle of the solution number 2, the automated collaborative ATM and U Space interface, we consider this a high dynamic management of the ATM U Space side airspace. And we are always segregating manned and non-manned aviation. Here we have a new definition of a new role in the ATM side, the role of in charge of manage the dynamic airspace reconfiguration. We call the DAR manager. and the capacity is to dynamically assign airspace volume to the U Space or the ATM in order to permit or prohibit the flight of the drones in the special volumes. So we can activate or deactivate the concrete U Space airspace volumes in order to permit or not the flight of drones. And also in this solution has been studied and managed the methods to manage contingencies and non-nominal situations in the several use cases we have been validated in the solution. Regarding the results, regarding the solution ones, we have several main points regarding the interface definitions. We have achieved that it is feasible to identify the common information exchange service in this initial interface. We have tested all the services include. All the services are provide information to the other system and to the other actors involved in the operations. And we have been tested that inside controller airspace, we require these services to be part of the interface and from the both systems. Regarding the roles and responsibilities, we have been analyzing the roles and the tasks, the new roles and tasks derived from the definition of these services. And we need to confirm yet that the roles will be part of the ATCO, probably, but we need to define which are the special tasks that we will perform and which other tasks will we need another special role in the ATM side. Regarding the technical flexibility, we have checked that this is feasible and effective, and the systems are prepared to advance with the next step in the integrations. The information exchange has been feasible between ATM and U Space, and the actors involved give us a positive feedback. The last point, the performance regarding the ATM U Space interface. The ATCO is able to perform their tasks as usual in nominal and non-nominal situation. The human performance regarding the workload it is acceptable. It increased, but not so much, because we have provided to the ATCO with situational awareness from the point of view of the drones. We have presented the flight plans, the tracks, the alerts, and all this kind of information that is needed in a very high risk environment with interaction with managed aviation. And the ATCO considers that improve the situational awareness in a big step. Regarding the tank work, we have developed a new procedure, new coordination method, because we have new integration of system and new actors, and we need to develop this working environment. The safety impact has been considered as neutral because we have provided the tools in order to maintain at least the level of safety, providing the situational awareness to the actor involved. And we have also defined the frequency of the information exchange, considered reasonable at this moment, and the service has been defined as expected for the information required. Regarding the solution number 2, the dynamic airspace reconfiguration process, the main conclusion is that the role and the responsibilities, the ATCO is able to perform the designated tasks related with the dynamic airspace reconfiguration, the activation of the U Space airspace volume in a timely and efficient manner. The tasks that the ATCO needs to deal with need to be confirmed because probably we need a new feature, a new role in the ATM side in order that be able to manage the DAR process, and probably this role should have ATCO capabilities. Regarding the working method, we consider as conclusion that the DAR is a good starting point for management of the geofence. It's the first step in this DAR process, and this service is supported by the other service defined in the interface. The DAR process is supported by the other one, like for example the geofencing information exchange service. We have already go to the core of the DAR chain, defining the DAR notification time, the time in advance that we communicate to the spatial space about the new DAR is going to be performed before the activation. Also the DAR duration, depending on the mission or the type of operation that we are going to consider. And also we have defined several types of DAR depending on the number of drones and the operation involved in the process. Regarding the ATIS interface, deal with other chains, the tools have been developed in order to provide the ADCO with this facility in order to perform the dynamic airspace reconfiguration. But we have identified that improvement will be needed, and we will need also the involvement of the operational people in these next steps. Regarding technical feasibility, we have obtained a consolidated service of that, supported by the other ones, including the ATM and U Space common interface. This is my brief resume of the project. If you want more information, you can visit the website, or you can visit our stand in SESAR here, and we can explain you more details about the project. And also, I would like to share with you that this project will continue in SESAR 3, and we will continue progressing in this definition of the DAR process and the interface between ATM and U Space.
Gracias, Manuel.
Thank you.
So now we will make the jump from what we've done to what we're about to do. So remember, to start with, we were looking at clean sheets of paper. We didn't know what things were going to look like. We had some exploratory research. We tried to demonstrate a few things. We came up with a concept and did a few more demonstrations. Now there's a regulation. We've got our preliminary results. We shouldn't any longer be looking at blue skies. We should be allowing for innovation, naturally, but now moving on, building on what we've got. And we have now 3 presentations that will show how our current round of what we call the digital sky demonstrators will be shortly adding to our body of knowledge and helping deployment. It's the key phrase. So when you hear these phrases, now think deployment and research rather than just research. So with my next presenter is Luc Anton. Luc is a former French Air Force air traffic controller, having experience in international affairs dealing with civil-military cooperation, European and national regulation, and airspace management policy, including the insertion of drones into airspace. He joined the Belgian ANSP Skies in October 2019 as UTM ATM senior expert in charge of operational projects. Luc is the Skies UTM manager since December 2021. And he's working on U Space implementation in Belgium. Luc, please.
Thank you, Robin. So, Birdie project. So first, the Birdie project stands for Belgium, Netherlands, U Space Reference Design Implementation. So here, this is an image of the landscape of the project. So you can see that, for instance, Helicus is in the project. Skies was in the SAFIR-Med, so this is the proof that we are in another step of the development, like Robin said, and now we are for the implementation. In this landscape, it's very interesting because you can see that we will cover all the aspects of the U Space implementation, and not only one aspect, but really all the aspects. You have the drone operator on the top of this landscape, so you have Helicus, you have SAPCA, Infrabel, and so on. So what is interesting also with these drone operators is that these drone operators have already customers to have some usage of drone as a service. So it's very important because, as you can see at the bottom of the landscape, we will also take into account the business case. We will also take into account the risk assessment and all these kind of things. So we have different actors. Skies as an NSP, Skies will be also a CISP, because this is an assumption in the Birdie. We will use a common information service provider. This is a choice. We will have also Skydrone as USSP, some IT providers. Airbus, for instance, will be in charge of this famous Article 18F. The Article 18F is the risk assessment, is how to conduct the risk assessment for a U Space airspace. It's quite new because it's larger than a normal airspace risk assessment. So, and it's quite new for everyone. Some other actors, I cannot say everything, but some other actors that I want to mention there is also the police and the defense, because they are state operators. For the police, drone operators, and for the defense, aircraft operator, and as you know, the state operator has the right or are allowed not to apply the EU regulation. Nevertheless, they are the airspace user, so we have to include them in this landscape. So we have another very important group in the Birdie project, which is the Birdie Advisory Board. So I said that it is very important because I will say that several times, but this is not only within the Birdie project that we will solve all the issue. So we will have to discuss with especially the Civil Aviation Authority, the Belgian one for the Birdie project, but with other civil aviation authority. So this is why in this Birdie advisory board we have the BCA, the Belgium Civil Aviation Authority, but we have also the Dutch one. We have Proximus, which is the network mobile phone operator, but providing the network for the future. Not discussion, but the exchange of information between different actors. We have university, we have also two other important partners in the Birdie Advisory Board, which are the Federal Aviation or Federation of General Aviation. So because the general aviation will be impacted by the U Space, in a certain measure, depending of the implementation of the U Space, but we will collect the impression, the advice of these actors, because it is also very important for the acceptance of the U Space implementation. In the Birdie project, two main objectives. The first one, as Robin said, it is the implementation of U Space. But implementation of U Space, what does that mean? So it means a lot of things. It means that the CISP will be certified, the USSP will be certified, the U Space airspace will be published. So even for the certification, for instance, behind you have a lot of things. You have business case, you have a contingency plan, you have a system to be operating, and this kind of thing. So it's very important when you talk about implementation. It's just a word, but behind you have a lot of things. And the objective number two is a demonstration of one, and I insist, not the scalable usage U Space reference deployment, but one scalable U Space reference deployment in Belgium, to be used by other European countries as a basis for a development of a U Space. So, what will be the expected result? First, we will have a stepped approach in the Birdie project. The first phase will be the phase one. Maybe I have to say that the Birdie project started in November 2022. The phase one is between Q2 and Q4 2023. We will establish a pre-U Space environment within what we call the early adopter area, which will be the port of Antwerp-Bruges. At the beginning, it will be limited to the Birdie drone operator, and we will test all the U Space system. And to do that, we will have to work on multiple domains to be able, at the end of this phase one, or close to the end of this phase one, to certify the CISP, the USSP, and then to put in place, really, for the first time in Belgium, the U Space airspace. So you can see that we already tackle CONOPS. It's not exactly the same CONOPS as we talked about before. This is really a concept of operation for the Birdie project, which means that we explain to the partners what do we want to achieve, how do we want to achieve, based on the information that we have before with the other project that we discussed about just before. The quality management plan, the business case, the risk assessment, I already talked about that, technical solution, airspace publication, and preparation of use cases. And we will have to tackle all the things together during the phase one in order, in the environment of the port of Antwerp-Bruges, to be able to certify the CISP and the USSP, as well publication of U Space airspace. Then we will have the phase two and the phase three. The phase two will be the usage of the experience of the phase 1 in order to extend the concept and the solution developed during the phase 1 in another environment. The port of Antwerp will be in an uncontrolled airspace, but with specific condition, because you have a reserved airspace, you have a UAS geographical zone with some condition to access. And what we want to do in the phase 2 is to use this experience and then to extend that to the controlled airspace, to a non-controlled airspace, but with another environment, not reserved airspace, for instance. And then the phase 2 will be performed during the Q3 2023 and the Q2 2024. This is the expectation. Gradually, we will open during this phase 2 the U Space airspaces to other drone operators and to collect information, their advice, and their way of working within this. And finally, we will have the phase 3 between Q3 2024 until the end of the project, which is Q2 2025. And it will be completely open to each and every drone operator. We hope to have fixed, when needed, to have fixed U Space airspace, thanks to the Belgium Civil Aviation Authority. And we will collect information and we will prepare finally the report with a running phase of U Space airspace. So the expected result at the end is U Space airspace implemented with the social acceptance and multi-level governance established, evaluation of business sustainability, and proposal to improve, harmonize standards and or regulation. This is also part of the job that we will have in mind for this project. So very ambitious, but we believe that we are really focused on the implementation. Again, it will be one solution, not the solution, but we hope that it will be one solution for the rest of Europe and for the development of this U Space airspace. This is the contact that you have. You have a dedicated website, not a lot populated because we start the work right now, but I hope that it will be done in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Luc. We do have one question on the Slido for you, just asking why there are no Dutch partners in the program.
Dutch partners are there because they are in the advisory board. So at the beginning we tried to have the Dutch partner, but for a reason and another. So, but nevertheless, we are open to revise the work plan, not to introduce the Dutch partner in the project as such, because it's impossible, as you know, because it's a European one, so we cannot do that. Nevertheless, we're still open to have maybe a use case with Dutch partners. This event is really important because we had discussion with our Dutch partner during the Amsterdam Drone Week, and it's really positive. So perfect. I believe that it can be done.
Thank you very much. So that was the first of our current Digital Sky demonstrators. We're now going to arguably the biggest consortium that we've had for a while. So I'd like to ask Andrew Haitley now to introduce our project Welcome. Andrew works in Eurocontrol's drone team and has been responsible for the Chorus ConOps since the very start. Therefore is deeply imbibed, shall I say, into this particular field. He's a key member of Europe's U Space family and also helps to coordinate all the European institutions and companies in this, and therefore is well qualified to talk about the very large project he's about to talk about. Andrew.
Thank you very much. So the U Welcome project, a very brief presentation. Come and see me. I'm on the SESAR stand both later this evening and twice tomorrow, so you can come and see me. I represent both Chorus XUM and U Welcome, but you can ask questions about either. So we are operating in 3 different countries. The U Welcome project, we will have flights based on test centers, and we're looking at test centers in Spain, Italy, and France. In France, there's only one dot shown there, but we have actually more than one center underneath that dot, and we have a corridor between them. In each of these countries, there'll be an activity a little bit like what Lucas described. I won't go into the details. There will be somewhat different configurations. In Spain, we will have multiple U Space service providers connected to a central CISP. In Italy, I think we will also have the same. And at one moment in one experiment, the Italian U Space service provider will come to Spain and operate there, just to prove some interoperability. The situation in each place is that we will set up a U Space environment at the test center, and there we will have flights, some of which we have organized for the purpose of the experiment. And in France, they won't be organizing special flights. They will take advantage of every flight at the test center to collect data, to try to demonstrate U Space is useful, feasible, cost-effective, and so on. So to summarize, we look at 3 different countries. We're focusing on interoperability. We're looking at high maturity for the U1 and U2 services. To make the bridge to the regulation, U2 is what's in the U Space regulation. U1 is kind of hinted at what's in 947, not there described as a U Space service, but it's implied. We're looking at live operational environments with the aim that at the end of the project they're left running. We want to capture data on thousands of flights over 3 years, and we will try to extend our experience to try and show how it can be applied all over Europe. This is, as Robin said, the biggest project I've ever been involved in. I think we have 51 partners involved. It's a bit of a monster, but we have activity which is country-specific, and we have a kind of transversal arm. There are organizations which are involved because they're interested in the transversal activities of the project, which I'll come on to on the next page. For example, DLR. There's no flying in Germany, but DLR will be involved in drawing conclusions from the operations in the other countries. So what have we got here? We have, in blue that should say, you welcome, but you can't read it. So we have a harmonization thread within you welcome, which is going to be transversal to these 3 projects. Our aim in the harmonization activity is to develop a handbook for future implementers of U Space. And it will draw on the best practice that we discover in the 3 projects in the 6 different countries in which we will be exploring, to an extent Netherlands, maybe 5.5 countries. But we will draw on the experience that we have across the 3 projects, and we will also be inviting information to come from other implementers within Europe. There is an activity in Sweden which we're closely linked to. They will be contributing to our process of concluding. So the harmonization work package is very strong in you welcome, and it is a key part of what the value that we aim to add by having such an enormous project, is to try and emphasize what we can draw on as general conclusions which can aid the whole community. So that's about all. I hand over now to Wasim.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Brief description of a project that's going to keep you busy for a while, I think.
It will.
So now we move to our final speaker and our final Digital Sky demonstrator. I'd like to introduce you to Wasim Dergesh. Dr. Dergesh is a co-founder and chief operating officer at Future Mobility Campus Ireland, or FMCI. FMCI has been established in Shannon to create Ireland's first testbed for advanced land and air mobility. Wasim is the project coordinator of Yellow Air. Did I say it right?
That's it.
Thank you. I've never got it right yet.
Not too far from it.
One of SESAR's JU's Digital Sky demonstrator. Thank you, Wasim, please.
Thank you very much, Robin, and thank you very much for all the projects that already prepared the field for me to speak very briefly. I think I can use any of the other demonstrators' presentations and just put my logo and our partners, and that's basically the same story. So the partners, this is a slide I would replace in all the other presentations. Ourselves as a test bed for mobility, land and air mobility, and then Collins Airspace being our technical provider for most of the U Space services in the project. Deep Blue are looking at the human factor and human aspect and human in the loop in all the integration of these new U Space services. Aftrain looking, for example, at skills gap analysis. The Shannon Airport Group, we cannot have, especially in Shannon, a demonstrator without getting the airport involved in this project. the Aviation Authority, which mainly the ANSP team that is involved in the project, but also the regulator aspect of it, it's more about advisory role rather than being inactive in this project. And MANA is one of the drone operators that we work with. So these are kind of the official, let's say, partners that are part of the project. Others will be non-beneficiary partners that are interested, being drone operators, being infrastructure providers, telecom providers. They want all to be part of this play because they want to know what's happening in the U Space implementation phases. So similar objectives to the previous DSDs were implementation and integration demonstrator. So probably the word demonstrator doesn't give it enough credit to what the project is going to do. We're not here just to demonstrate how it works. We're here to demonstrate that it works, and to demonstrate that it should also be running as sustainable business, hopefully beyond the lifetime of the project or the funding. So, and obviously we're all looking at similar objectives, demonstrating the feasibility and the efficiency of running eVTOL services or all sorts of drone operations. Deployment of the U Space services, same thing, it's U1, U2 services where we would be targeting at high-level TRL 7 and 8 in this project. And particularly there is interest from the air navigation team in the Aviation Authority at the possible separation standards between manned and unmanned aviation. And it's not just about defining standards, but also how can we put these in place, especially that will be operating most of the use cases in a Class C controlled airspace. So the project phased over 4 different phases, going slow with kind of an extended, let's say, not beyond visual line of sight, let's call it extended visual line of sight, with a kind of a BVLOS validation. That's kind of starting slow, going towards expanded or extended BVLOS operations, depending on the target area where we're going to be operating, the drones that we'll be using, etc. This is kind of a primary fleet of drones that we'll be experiencing with during the course of the project lifetime. So I was talking about controlled and Class C airspace. So the middle of that big bubble there is the Shannon Airport. So it's a major international airport with quite a good kind of movements happening most of the time. It's used with some airlines as a test area as well for training pilots and etc. So there is quite a good movement. And the challenge is really how do we integrate with civil aviation in such area. So we're also kind of, this is the primary 3 areas of testing or operations during the project. Our Advanced Air Mobility Hub, which is close to the airport, it's just 2 fences between the 2 areas. The Spanish Point Airfield, which is a little bit remote area that has close access to the sea if we want to do a bit of complex operations. And we have a small bubble inside the big bubble, which is dedicated for a model flying club there. So we use that for a kind of a casual trial for a quick authorization because it kind of has its own pre-approved, let's say, authorizations there. And it helps us speed up a little bit the integration of some of the tests that we're doing. Other resources available for the project. That's the kind of the small office space there, which is just adjacent to the airport. That's where we would do most of the trials. Our ground control station, which is based on our office. We're currently building a mobile operation unit to be able to move around the country and do trials in different areas. It's not mentioned in the slides, but we are also ongoing some conversations with the Irish military, the Irish Air Corps, that are interested as well to see if we want to trial flying from uncontrolled airspace to controlled airspace under the military's jurisdictions, how this will happen, how will they also look into implementing U Space services under their own jurisdiction. That's something that is quite ambitious, for example, beyond the ambitions that we defined for the project. But if it happens, it might be a very good addition to all the DSDs to learn from as well. So if you're interested in knowing more about what we're doing, the team and everyone, please don't hesitate to contact me or our dissemination manager from Deep Blue. Thank you.
Thank you, Wasim. And thank you all for these interesting presentations. So we've told you a story today, from research through to being able to reconcile and analyse the research, leading to a way of demonstrating and leading to deployment. But of course, this isn't the end of the story. We can't walk away from these projects and say, that's it, we've done it, well, aren't we clever? These are still initial deployments, initial implementations, and a lot of issues will come out of this, with many aspects that still need to be worked out before we can provide the length of services that we really like. So I want to ask all the panelists, we have 6-7 minutes left, and I'd like to ask each of you in turn, if possible, what do you think the priorities for research are, and that when you're doing your demonstration, are you going to come across these moments and you go, you know, we don't know how to do that. Where are we going to need some more research? To start, Wasim, maybe would you like to start?
Yeah, so I think if you want to look at the U Space concept from the very beginning, probably we should start the whole journey again and optimize every step. But it's not to point that. But I think what's really important, especially that when we come to the end of demonstrator implementations, is how do we make the right business model that would sustain U Space deployments and help scaling these deployments from our test site to country level to Europe level and potentially beyond. I think it's one of the objectives that we have in the DSDs, and it was explicitly called out in Luke's presentation, that finding the right business model and probably finding the regulatory framework around it, because probably a business model is not something that we should be too flexible around it. Probably a regulatory framework around that is kind of needed and needs a little bit of research before probably implementing any of the business models.
Thank you. So maybe I should skip Andrew for a moment and go to Luke to expand on that, or a different subject as you choose.
So the question that I ask you now.
The question
so
is
for me,
yeah.
for me, it's more technical research. So I have in mind.
Okay.
So, maybe to improve the flow, the possibility to have the flow of information more fluid. Why? Because usually when you talk about U Space, you talk about, okay, we have to develop the detect and avoid. Yes. But let me coming back in the reason why we have this U Space. You have this U Space because normally you have to tackle a high number of aircraft or unmanned aircraft or complex mission. And then I consider that if you go a little bit forward and then you achieve this objective with a lot of aircraft and a lot of complex mission, even if you have a detect and avoid solution, you have a domino effect. And it will be very, very important, much more than in ATM, because we will have more density in the U Space. This is why I have in mind, even if I'm surprised or I'm surprising some people, but maybe to have this flow of information, because the detect and avoid solution in this kind of environment should be really efficient if you have the correct exchange of information between stakeholders. This is why I say that, again, maybe it's surprising, but no, I believe that we have to think about.
Thank you, Luke. Andrew, didn't mean to skip you.
Yeah, I would propose a slightly different direction. I think we've gone a long way here towards the implementation of U2. We've run very fast in our U Space work, but we still miss one big issue, which is the flight rules. And I think if we're going to get to a level where we can fly in an integrated environment, we need a way to do that safely and legally. And I think I would very much welcome that we start thinking about the flight rules. ICAO will not propose something. ICAO will eventually give their blessing to something. And it's only in the environment of a regional development, like in Europe, that we would have both the ability to do testing on this and the collective interest to try and solve the problem and put it forward. So that would be my favorite.
Just a small one then. Yes.
Little one.
Manuel. Manuel?
Talking about the information flows you told before, I consider it's very important to standardize the information exchange we have inside the geospace, in the ecosystem, and also the information exchange beyond this system between ATM and U Space, because this will make possible the interoperability between all of systems. This is the main issue I see.
Okay. Thank you.
A few points from my side. Indeed, Andrew, I mean, obtaining operational authorization also for the projects, I think you mentioned it, it consumes actually 2/3 of the full effort of the project, so to speak, which is not our aim. In the end, we want to put new methods in place to really fly and to get things safe, but not to get the authorization as a basis to fly in a current legal setup. Although it has to be safe, but within the project, maybe we can do something special about that. Of course, we're coming closer and closer to the markets. The Birdie and the Welcome projects are actually implementation projects, and so that will maybe hopefully be solved. But that's a key issue that now also, because we'll be focusing on U3 and U4, and we don't want to spend too much time on U1 and U2, because otherwise we'll not reach our targets. Second point is that the harmonization in Europe. So we see, and we are all collaborating to get the European legislation in place. But actually, when we then try to bring one authorization to the other country, which should then theoretically be just a simple next step, then we see that we actually have to start. I would not say fully again, but there is huge work done. So this is, I think, more of Europe would, I think, be very welcome. And I think, of course, now we're for the first time trying this new legislation. But I think that is really something that I would really request all the parties to not have too many deviations by country, to really try to stick to as much as possible a common set. So that would be my wish.
Your wish. Thank you. And finally, Giancarlo, please.
Yeah, let's say there are several elements that were already addressed, like, as you said, this flow. I think what we need to have in place also to harmonize and to interface properly the air traffic management operations and the U Space operations is mainly to have a sort of collaborative decision-making process that will help the different actors to get the required information and to act accordingly, but in a synchronized way. This is one point. Then, of course, in Chorus 6 we were, with Andrew, we were clearly discovering there is a big issue that we have to address that is related to the complex operations with the vertiports, especially when these vertiports operations are happening in a managed airspace like an airport or in the urban area. So it's something that should be addressed as well. So these are the main elements. Then the flight rules, of course, is one of the aspects we were discussing quite heavily. But again, what I'm saying is that in this world, we were just addressing some questions. There are still a lot of answers that should be given. For example, one additional element is also in this dense scenario you were mentioning, Luke, most probably, especially the small US, are not only a problem for the commercial aviation, but mainly for the urban air mobility, for example. So it's really becoming sensitive. And in the SESAR Joint Undertaking was already putting in place an activity, was ASPRID project, to start to look how we can mitigate the risk of having rogue drone operations that will have, let's say, will trigger a domino effect in the, let's say, in the U Space area. This is an element that was not addressed for the way forward, but I think it will become even more sensitive, not only for the commercial aviation, but mainly for the urban air mobility operations.
Thank you, Giancarlo. Well, we've reached the end of our allotted time. There are more questions on Slido, but I think one of them refers to separation standards, which is such a colossal subject. I think we're probably going to have to chicken out of that one for now. However, I'm sure many of our panelists will be delighted to speak to you offline to discuss that one. I know that I could spend a day talking about that and not draw breath. And there was another question about GA aircraft in our tests. Basically, our tests are normally put into reserved airspace, and so there will be procedures in place for managing GA aircraft. Hopefully, they don't just appear and spoil our games. But nevertheless, it might happen, in which case, absolutely, the drones would be grounded, if necessary, as a safety hazard, so for sure. So with that, all too brief canter through our project, I'd just like to say a final thank you to Asim, to Andrew, to Luke, to Manuel, to Michael and to Giancarlo for the interesting presentations in telling us the story of SESAR so far and where it's going in the future. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.